Okay, so I'm just waiting to for everybody to come, but hello, my name is Jenny. I'm Jenny Knight, and yeah, I'm just waiting to check that everybody's here. Okay, so I'm going to start talking, and I really want to get this off. That's better. Okay, so I'm going to start talking and introduce myself and tell you about why I'm holding a workshop on rejection and building resilience. So I had an experience about 10 years ago. I'd written a novel. I'd been writing for a lot of years, but short stories because I had small children and work and I didn't have time. So I wrote a novel and sent it off to agents, as you do, and had a load of full manuscript requests, which was all very exciting. And several of them were really interested. And one in particular who was massive, asked me to come for a meeting. I went for a meeting, and she expressed massive interest in what I was doing and wanted me to do a revise and resubmit. We didn't sign because she said, you know, let's not do that. It might take you a year to do the revisions, which it did. It took me actually longer than a year because small kids, work, all the rest of it. So to cut a very long story short, I worked with this agent for 2.5 years. And at the end of that time, she decided that, no, she wasn't going to sign me. And it was one of the most horrible experiences of my life. All in all, 4 years of work, 2 odd years working with an agent, thinking that this would be it, that she was going to sign me. It was all going to fly. I was going to have this amazing career. And then I found myself sitting in my house, and I'm not going to lie about this. I did not get dressed for 3 days. I just couldn't. The whole thing was so upsetting. I found it brutal, and it very nearly destroyed me as a writer. So it took a long time to pick myself up. And when I did that with the help of Womentoring and a wonderful mentor called Isabel Costello. And I started to write again. And it took me a long time, a very long time. I'm not going to lie about that either. I wrote short stories for a while, sent them off, had a couple of competition, kind of wins, and that helped. But it took me years to get over that rejection. And I'm happy to say that 10 years later, I wrote another book. And this time the experience was totally different. I had a lot of agent interest because of common people obviously, that kind of changed my life in a lot of ways. But I did already have a written book. So it wasn't just because of common people. It was because I had a written book that was much, much, much better than the first. And I didn't write it to try and please anybody or to go for a market. I wrote it because I was at the point of writing then in my life of having to forget about the marketplace, having to forget about agents, because I would never have written anything else if that was all I had in my head at that time. I wrote because I loved it, because I missed it, because it's how I make sense of my world. And I tried something completely different. I wrote a memoir. Not initially meaning to, I was meaning to do more fiction, but that's what happened. And then happy ending to that story. After 20 years, I have a fantastic agent, Jo Unwin. And I thought that meant that here we go, career's going to fly again. And sadly, it didn't. It kind of went out before the pandemic. I had a couple of good responses, but a raft of not good responses. Good responses, but still rejections. And at the moment, I'm still waiting on editors and waiting to see what happens. It will happen. It's just a matter of who and when. So I've had a lot of experience with rejection. Rejection from trying to get onto MA courses, rejection from, competitions when I first started writing out, rejections from magazines, rejection, the big, massive agent rejection. So I have learned over the last 20 years an awful lot, and I've spoken to an awful lot of other writers. And the one thing I can categorically assure you is that every single writer and you talk to will come across rejection in their life. It's not a cliche, or if it is a cliche, it's because it's very true. And every book that you read, it's worth bearing in mind that that writer will have been rejected too. And if they haven't on the first one, and the first one's been a massive success, then chances are they absolutely will on one of their future ones. So if you look at the stats just for agents, most agents get 2,000 plus manuscripts a year. And I would imagine in the pandemic, I know from talking to my agent that that has doubled, if not trebled. And out of those thousands of manuscripts, they might take on 3 or 4 authors a year. So you've got about a 1 in 1,000 chance of having your manuscript selected, and about 2% of authors get published. So it's a kind of a losing game in a way, right from the start, in that if you are not prepared to accept that rejection is a massive possibility, if not the more likely thing, and that there is so much you can actually learn from that, then don't write, would be my advice. If you're going to write just for yourself, that's great. But if you're going to write to submit, which is, you know, playing the game, you know, real writers get rejected all the time. It strikes me in a lot of ways that it's like an apprenticeship rejection. It's like an apprenticeship for your writing, because if you can get yourself over how it feels, all your writing after that will get better and better and better. And it's, you know, you get better at it. You get better at recognizing the pattern of it. With my big rejection, when it came at the beginning of half term, and I still had small kids at home. But even with the small kids at home in the beginning of half term, I couldn't actually get dressed for 3 days. I couldn't stay in bed, which if I hadn't had them here, I probably would have done. But I just couldn't face anything. It absolutely kicked the stuffing out of me. And it felt so brutal. And it took a long time, but I have got to recognize now and over the years that in essence, rejection is incredibly valuable. I'm so sorry about that pinging. I thought I'd turn my email off. And when they say it's not you being rejected, which in a sense it's not, it's your work that's being rejected, not you as a person. Actually, that doesn't really apply. It is you being rejected, because if you're a writer, you are putting your heart and soul into what you're writing. So it is you being rejected. That's why it hurts. That's why it feels so bad. That's why you can't logic your way out of it. You have to feel that. You have to honor that. There's no point saying to yourself, I am just going to get over this. I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to just be strong. If it hurts, it hurts. So feel that hurt. You are absolutely within and allowed to feel that hurt. You pour a lot of yourself, a lot of your energy and a lot of your time into your writing. And it is very personal, because every bit of your writing, even if you're writing sci-fi, even if you're writing the most ridiculous fantasy story, your experience, your view of the world, you know, your character, things of you, things that have meant things to you, that have hurt you or made you happy, whatever, your experience is in there, you are in there. So you really do have to honor the fact that rejection hurts. Cry, sulk, you know, comfort eat, watch whatever you need to do, and remember that it will pass. You know, you get better at it the more you do it. I'm not going to say it gets easier. You know, I'm not going to say that there aren't those that still, you know, make you want to write the day, the next day, maybe the week, maybe you don't want to write anymore. I'm not going to say that the feeling gets better. It's like any kind of pain, you know, it's still as fresh each time. The difference is that you get to learn the pattern of how you react to that. So I now know if I get a rejection, that for 2 or 3 days, nothing that anybody says is going to cheer me up, because I just am feeling it. I'm really feeling it, and I'm new. But I know that it will pass. And I know there are certain things that I can do to help myself, and certain things that I've learned from other writers that help them. And that's what I want to kind of share with you today. So the first thing I'm going to say to you is that one thing I learned, and I hang on to this and I bang on about it all the time. Writing is like a Christmas tree. So all the publishing, the prizes, the accolades, all of that, they are great, but they are the lights and the baubles. Writing is the tree. Is it an author you want to be, or is it a writer? They're not the same thing. Writers write because they love writing, because they want to communicate, because they want to express their world, whatever their reasons are for writing. Authors are people who publish. And maybe for a lot of your writing, you are not going to be the person who publishes. That doesn't mean you will never be, but it can't be your only reason for writing. You have to write because you love writing, because something in you needs to do it, like it's a compulsion. And I think writing is a compulsion. So it's about that, first and foremost, keeping in your head that all that stuff, publishing, prizes, competitions, winning things, getting into that course, this course, they are lovely, but they are adornments. They are not what writing is about. And getting an agent doesn't mean you won't get rejected. Having a book written that an agent loves or an editor loves doesn't mean you won't get rejected. Agents and editors get rejected all the time, and they find it as hard as we do, you know. So I would say that's the first thing to bear in mind. Think of a Christmas tree and hold that in your head all the time, because you are going to need to if you're going to keep writing. You know, I've been doing this 20 years. I know a lot of successful authors, a lot of brilliant writers who are not yet published. It's a very business market. And the other thing I would say is that, remember, someone once told me this, and it stuck with me ever since, after my horrible rejection. She said, look, you know, what you've got to understand is that it's a marketplace. It's a business. Publishing is a business. Publishing is not the same as writing. And what you're writing is a bag of carrots in a marketplace for a business. And I had this not so long ago when I was trying to submit something else, and I got very upset. I spoke to someone else who's a businessman who said, look, you know, it doesn't mean your work's not good. And it doesn't mean that, actually, a lot of the time, rejection. It really doesn't. It's really worth bearing that in mind. I love the metaphor that he gave me, which is that some people want apples and some people want pears. It doesn't matter how good your apple is. If that person wants a pear, and some people, I said this to my agent recently, and she said, yeah, and sometimes people change their minds. They might have been selling pears for ages, and then suddenly they decide they're going to go into passion fruit. You know, it's a business. And so the rules of normal, you work hard, you do this, this will happen, doesn't necessarily apply for writing. It doesn't work like that. And it being a business means that it can be incredibly subjective, you know, depending on what that person is into buying. And it sometimes doesn't stop there. You can get an agent, as I have. You can put a book out that had so much interest, as I did, and then find an editor who absolutely loves it, as I did, and then they can't get it past acquisitions. So the editor feels rejected, the agent feels rejected, and there you are still feeling rejected. It's really, really hard. I mean, I would suggest if you want to find, you know, one way of comfort, then Google and look at other people's rejection stories, look at agents' rejection stories, read editors' blogs, you know, see how they go, because it really isn't unique to bad writers. It happens to good writers all the time. We can do the famous writers. We can say, well, look at J.K. Rowling, you know, Stephen King. Yes, do that, but also look at people who are in the place that you're in, because if you start to follow more and more writers and have more time with writers, and I talk about this a bit later in Writing Community, then you get to track their careers, and you get to see that person that you saw being really upset after rejections has suddenly been published, you know, or has won a prize, and that's led to something else. I couldn't have predicted what common people would do. I really didn't. I had no concept of how much that would alter things. And it's important to remember that when I applied for Common People, I was in quite a negative place. I did it really because I thought, well, what have I got to lose? Because I was quite negative at the time. So what have I got to lose is a really good way of looking at it, because if you're already feeling like you've lost everything anyway, and you don't really know if you want to carry on doing this and being a writer, you genuinely have nothing to lose, and you do have things to gain. Rejection is a really good teacher. If you get, for example, a good rejection, And I have had, I wish I could show you, I wish I could video them. I have a file literally as long as my arms of rejections. And some of them wouldn't even spell my name right. I'd get Dear Jeremy, Dear Johnny, Dear Minnie. I would get other people's rejections. Sometimes you get nothing. But if you get a good one, and a good one is still a rejection, but it gives you some feedback on your work, or it advises you on what's not working for that person. It teaches you several things. It teaches you that everyone's response to your work is subjective. So you may submit something, say to agents, have one agent tell you they hate your characters, another agent tell you they love your characters. It's subjective. So one person's rejection is not necessarily going to be everybody's rejection. If you're applying to competitions, you are subjective or subject to whoever is reading your entry. So it's not always that your work isn't good enough. It's that, you know, somebody prefers a pear and you've got an apple. It's a business, it's a bag of carrots. Maybe that agent is representing something too similar to what you've already done. I've had that rejection several times over. Maybe they're just giving you criticism that you can go away and you can work with and you can make your writing better. There is always something to learn from. I mean, we don't learn so much from good times, I've learned in life. We learn more from the painful times. And rejection is painful. So always think about what there is to learn. Give yourself the time and space to just feel it, to just be with that, to be unhappy and feeling kind of shat on and what's the point and why am I doing this? And you may go through that run of rejections for such a long time, and then one thing will happen. I think before Common People, I'd more or less given up. I'd not given up writing, I was still writing, but not expecting to get anywhere, or thinking I'm always going to be the person who cheers other people on. You know, it's never going to happen to me. So I might as well just write what I want to write. I might as well get really into it. I might as well see how far I can take myself, and I'll just apply for this thing because I've got nothing to lose. So a negative state can actually turn into a positive one. Take a break when you get rejected. I think that's a really important thing to do. You know, maybe sometimes you don't feel like reading. I would suggest that you read two things the next time you get rejected. I would read something by your favourite writer or someone you know inspires you with their prose. I read Edna O'Brien's short stories for ages, or Hilary Mantel. And I would say do that. And I would also say, whatever you do, read something rubbish. Read something really rubbish. Someone recommended to me, and I laughed at the time, but she was absolutely right. I read Richard Madeley's novel, which was insane. Sorry, I'm just trying to turn this mail off. I read Richard Madeley's novel. I'm sure he's a lovely bloke, and I'm sure he was a good TV presenter, but I tell you what, he's not a very good novelist. And that inspired me as much as reading the people that I love, whose writing makes me fired to sit down and do words. I read something that was so rubbish to me and printed, published. I felt quite insulted in a way. I was like, well, I can do better than that. So that also spurred me on. So take a break. Reconnect with books, reconnect with short stories, with poems, reconnect your love of the word and your belief in the fact that you do have a talent and a skill to do it. You need those. No one else can give them to you. Doesn't matter how many people tell you you're wonderful, you're great, you're ace. Nobody can give you that. You do have to find that in yourself, and you have to go back to basics, really. So I would suggest, yeah, you take a break and really remember that rejection is only one part of who you are. It's one segment of the orange that makes up you. Lots of fruit in my rejection analogies. I'm not sure why, but there is. So it's only one part of you. You know, you're still whatever you are. You're still a parent or a friend or a daughter or a sibling or whatever it is you are, a worker. You are still all of those things. This is only one part of who you are, and it doesn't define you as a writer. You are always a writer if you are writing. Doesn't matter whether you're published. That doesn't make you a writer. I wrote for 20 years and wasn't published. I mean, does that make me not a writer? Of course not. There's nothing there that I've wasted. If I look back at earlier stuff, everything I've written since is so much better, just so much better. It's an apprenticeship, and Rejection is part of that apprenticeship. The only reason you're not a writer is you're not writing. So if you're writing, you're a writer. If you're submitting work, you're a real writer, because you are trying to get it out there. You're trying to get it read. You're trying to connect with other people. Or you can make the decision that that's not for you, that actually you'd rather just write, and maybe you'd put it in a drawer. That's fine, but don't call yourself not a writer. You are a writer if you're published. Doesn't make you not a real writer. You're only not a real writer if you want to be published and you're not putting yourself out there to get published. It does make you doubt yourself. And that's something that I had massive conversations. It was one of the reasons I picked my agent, Jo, because she said, you know, I won't take clients who don't have self-doubt, because I actually believe it's essential to the creative process. And the more that I work as an editor now as well, the more I can see there's a huge difference between confidence and talent. Sometimes the most confident people are not the most talented writers, and sometimes the people who seem to have no belief in themselves at all produce the most stunning, amazing work. So, you know, Rejection will sharpen and toughen you up, and self-doubt's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing as long as it doesn't overrun itself and control you. Let Rejection sharpen you. Let it toughen you up. You're going to need that. If you get a good rejection, ask if you can revise and resubmit. Ask if they'll see your next work. Find a way to focus. Oh, it's all going on. Sorry. Find a way to focus on your prose or your plot. Find a way to help you with your weaknesses. See if you can take a course, find a mentor, apply to things like free reads. You don't need money. I applied for and won a TLC free read. That was invaluable. It helped me to see where I could improve my novel. I applied for free mentoring from Womentoring. You know, I'm so sorry about that ping. That was my text. I really am sorry. I can't seem to turn things off between my Mac and my phone. I do apologize. Try and take back control where you can. Your control feels like it's taken away. So really try and take back that control. And if you have no money, then look for all the things that are free, and there are lots of them. Your regional writing centres will have them. If you start following more writers on Twitter, you will start to see a lot more pay it forward. An awful lot of writers, Anna Vaught is one, but an awful lot of writers offer mentoring. Writers are quite a generous bunch, it seems to me. So make sure that you really do follow and be with other writers, because that's a really good way to find out, you know, how to improve, how to work. And there are a lot of pay it forward schemes at the moment. So think about that. Think about what you would write if you're not in a marketplace. If you're not thinking about how you can publish, you're thinking about your passion and what you want to write. Your passion is for words, for how words come together to form work, art that you want to share with other people. Whatever your reasons are for that, whether they're to entertain, to connect. I wrote my memoir because I wrote it as the book I couldn't find for the worst year of my life. That was my reason for writing it. I couldn't think about publishing or agents, because I was so convinced no one would want to read it, because it would be so grim, you know, that nobody would want to read it. But it hasn't turned out that way. But I think the reason that this has worked and the other one didn't is because I wrote what was in here. I wrote what really fired me, what I really wanted to write, and I let go totally of anything outside of the writing of that until it was completely finished. And things like then applying for a TLC free read showed me there was potential, that I wasn't, you know, going to be barking up the wrong trees again. So definitely think about that. You know, try and find yourself a writing routine after you've been rejected, after you've had your period of mourning and grief and whatever it is you need to do, and find some tiny project. You know, maybe try to have, like, I don't know, if you're a playwright, then maybe try something smaller, maybe try poetry. If you're a novelist, then maybe try a short story. If you're a short story writer, then try flash or try a novel. You know, try something, however small, that will promote your self-worth and keep your writing muscle going. You have got to be able to praise and reward yourself. Every time you produce a piece of writing, you've done something that millions of other people talk about. The more you get into writing, the more writers you spend time with, the more people ask what you do and you say writer, the more you hear it. Oh, there's a book in everyone. Oh, I've got a story. Well, most of them haven't and most of them won't, but you're already writing. So keep doing it. You're already, giving yourself a better chance by committing something to paper, pen to paper, fingertip to keyboard. Just keep doing it. And something else that struck me when I did a panel on this at Prima Donna was the writer Sadie Knott, who, to cheer herself up, wrote a rejection letter to agents. I suggest that you do the same thing. I suggest that at some point you write down either a time that you had something horrible happen and felt rejected. Write that experience, nothing to do with writing, write it anyway, because you recovered from it. Write a rejection letter to agents to lighten yourself up, and look up Sadie's. Her name is Sadie Knott. Look up that letter. And bear in mind that Neil Gaiman's attitude to rejection is to write something so brilliant that nobody could ever reject it. So those are good things, The brain plays tricks. It's going to see what you focus on everywhere. And that's a psychological thing. That's not just my opinion. That's something I learned from a psychologist and from Isabel Costello, who runs workshops on writing and rejection and resilience. It's not a zero-sum game, Other writers being published and getting deals and all of this doesn't mean that you won't. It means that because they have, there's all the more chance that you will. It's a never-ending pot that sometimes it's going to be your time, you're going to ride a good wave, and sometimes it's not. It's a hard, mercurial marketplace. It's really hard, and you do have to accept that. There are highs, there are lows, but even a good rejection is a brilliant thing. Pin it up on your wall, look at it, because not hearing anything is standard. Having something that's just, we didn't really, sorry, is absolutely standard. For an agent to take the time, or an editor of a magazine, whoever it is, to take the time to write to you and say, your writing's good, but that's worth its weight in gold. Pin it up on the wall and look at it a lot. It means you're playing the game. You are being a real writer. Rejection isn't failure. It's only failure if you stop. So I think it's really worth remembering that you don't have to do this. That's your choice. You don't have to. So I'm going to talk quickly about building resilience. I say quickly, I'm going to talk and then I'm going to have a look at some of the questions if you've got any. The only difference between published and unpublished writers is 9 times out of 10, persistence. It's carrying on. It's the Buddhist thing, persist and persevere even in the face of repeated failure. You have to accept that if you're going to adapt this life. You have to learn to adapt to it. Talk to people. Talk to people about it. Talk to other writers, best of all. They are your tribe. They are the people who are going to get this. Your family and your friends are going to love your writing because they love you. That's not what you need, and it certainly isn't what your writing needs. You need constructive criticism to make your writing better. You need to be reading other people's stuff so that you can learn what makes things work and what doesn't, because it will smack you in the face in somebody else's work where sometimes it doesn't in the writing that you do, because you're too close to it, you're too familiar. So, really, really, really focus your writing life on making it that. Yes, you've got all these other areas of your life, but don't expect them to be the people that you need. They're not so much of the time. You need other writers. You really do. You need to foster optimism. Obviously, you need to keep going in a way that you can find some form of positivity, and that comes as you apply more. You submit here, you submit there, you submit here, you submit there, you're down, you're rejected, then you get one. And sometimes that's all you need. It's such a boost, but it isn't going to come to you if you're not continually doing it. Ask yourself why. Ask yourself why, honestly. Why do you write? What is it you want to share? What gives you meaning and purpose in your writing? If you are going to be resilient and build yourself up, these are questions you need to ask yourself. Why am I doing this? What matters to me? What gives me meaning? What gives me purpose? Forget about the marketplace. You might succeed there, you might not. It might take you years, might happen tomorrow. You don't know. So focus on what's important. What gives you meaning? What gives you purpose? What makes you want to do this crazy thing of sitting in a room, making things up in your head? I mean, if I said that to somebody, my job is to sit in a room and make things up in my head, they'd look at me like I was mentally ill. And there are a lot of writers who think they're bipolar. You know, it's a very odd thing to do. Famously, years ago, the preserve of people who had problems with alcohol and drugs now, and we can see why. It's lonely, it's hard. There's no reward necessarily, or guarantee of reward for hard work. So you really need to nail why it is you do it. You really do. And change your self-talk. Just because you got rejected before, it doesn't mean that you will always be rejected. And if you did get rejected before, you got over it. So you will again. If you think you can't write well because you got rejected, you've been able to write well before. So you can. If you think your work is shit, then commit to not stopping until it's the best you can make it. Learn to give yourself credit for what you're doing. It's hard. And find a way of coping with that inner critic. Name it, shrink it, mute it, befriend it, tell it to fuck off. Do what you need to do. You will have to live with an inner critic. It isn't going to go away. It doesn't go away for writers I know who've written 11 books. It doesn't go away for people who are insanely successful. I was at university with the guy who now writes with his brother the Jack Reacher books. It doesn't mean that he doesn't have an inner critic going on telling him this is crap every now and again. It goes with the territory. So find ways to build your own resilience. 9 times out of 10, they will come from conversations with other writers, from reading the right kind of material. I read things like Brene Brown, Rising and Failing and whatever they're called. There's 2 of them, Daring Greatly and Rising Strong, I think it's called. They're fantastic for teaching you how to deal with failure. There is so much literature out there. There are so many writers and blogs and all the rest of it. You are not alone. You don't have to be alone, and you don't have to feel these feelings alone. But it is going to be hard for people who aren't writers to get it, because they're going to give you positives and J.K. Rowling stories. So learning with your own resilience, building your own resilience, accepting that the writing life is hard and it isn't always going to be good. It doesn't matter how good it might be for other people. It doesn't matter how good you think your writing is. It's not always about those things, accept that it's hard, accept that it's going to have a lot of this. I went on a WriteNow thing not so long ago, and there was a writer there, quite a famous writer, who stood up, and everyone else had been positive, and he just said, look, accept it. The writing life is just a kind of career of disappointments. And we were all like, God, how negative, But in a lot of ways, he's right. If you can't deal with that, then you need to choose another way of being, or writing for different reasons. But if you're looking to get published, to be a published writer, it's very hard. So you have to find ways of accepting that that's the game that you play. Learn when to let go, learn where to put your energy. Give yourself a certain amount of space and room and time to recover from the feelings, but there has to come a point when you move on. There has to come a point where you move through. You have to be quite firm with yourself about that, because it's not going to help you ultimately. I have, and I'll show you, this is pinned to my screen, and all it says, if you can't see it, is, will it help? I ask myself that question every time. I ask myself that question of, if I'm going to sit here, be miserable, tell myself I'm crap, I can't write, I'm never going to succeed, I can't write another book, I'm thinking it, will it help? Will it? Is it not better to go, I feel like rubbish, do you know what, I'm going to take a leaf out of one of my favourite writers' books, and that's Hilary Mantel. She's a fantastic person to read about writing. Even writing the fantastic Cromwell things, she had days that were just, she said, I'll just sit in front of my computer and it will be noun, verb, object. That is all I do all day. And it's the most depressing, awful thing. That's writing. Read other writers, learn how they cope, learn what they do, learn how to build your own resilience for you. Accept that no one else can do it, accept that it's hard. And remember, nothing is ever wasted. Nothing you write is wasted. It will come back in the weirdest ways. You'll have been something from something you wrote that wasn't quite working. You'll be writing something else and a light bulb will go off and suddenly it works. You can go back to a short story that you don't know why it didn't work. You sent it a few places or you thought it was good. You read it maybe 5 years later and you suddenly go, I completely missed the point of what I was doing. Or you've had a different idea. It fits. Nothing is wasted. So, you know, these are all ways to help you build resilience. Another is, you know, to get yourself a writing toolkit, really, you know, asking yourself, where are you now? Where do you want to be? What's stopping you? You know, realistically, what do you need? Do you need space? Do you need time? Are you trying to write something that's not sustainable with where you are? We're in a pandemic. If you have small kids and you're writing in a pandemic, or you're working, or you're stuck in a house full of other people, how sustainable is the piece of writing you're working on? Maybe it's not the time to do a novel. Maybe it's the time to focus on shorter pieces. You know, be creative with your creativity. You are creative by the very nature of what you do. So finding creative solutions is a really good place to put your energy. You know, self-belief's almost impossible. We know this, but balance is, you can take care of yourself, get the sleep, the rest, the time that you need. If you need financial help, there are grants, there are schemes, there are loads of things to look up. Put your energy into doing something constructive and working out how you can benefit your own writing career by joining courses or seeing if you could get a mentor, or, you know, use your energy wisely is what I would say. And being present, you know, talking about your work, getting noticed online. I'm not advocating that you try and get a massive Twitter following or something, but talking about your work, engaging with the writing. Bookish Twitter is a fantastic thing. You know, it's not like normal Twitter. It's brilliant. You know, even watching David Nichols with what he did with debut authors throughout the lockdowns. Fantastic. You know, there's so much these people can help you with. So persistence, adapting, talking to people, you know, really being specific about what you feel psychologically, you know, developing your own emotional vocabulary will help you. It really, really will. You know, these are all ways in which you can get stronger, you know. So get yourself a community. Get yourself that kind of encouragement. Get yourself a place with people, and that can be online, where you are constantly growing as a writer. Writers don't stop growing. They don't hit a peak like athletes and then sort of tail off. They're always, anyone who's followed Hilary Mantel, she was writing for decades before the Cromwell books, moderately successful. I mean, you know, you get better and better and better at it. Get insight into the craft, not just the talent. You know, read other people's work. Deal with the fact that there's always going to be somebody better off than you, and there's always going to be somebody worse off than you. You know, it's an emotionally hard thing to navigate, this particular way of life. And we can't always have it. Even some of the most successful writers I know don't necessarily not have a day job. They have a day job. You know, publishing doesn't pay what it used to. It's quite hard to make a living from this. So yeah, be in there with the kind of growing and the working of how emotionally hard this is. It doesn't follow the rules of other careers. You work really hard, you put your hours in, you get a few accolades, one, bam, you're off. Doesn't work like that. Maybe you've got a first book published and maybe the second one doesn't. You know, I know lots of people that's happened to. So yeah, I mean, the more that you can find a writing community, the better you're equipping your own resilience, because these are the people who get every single thing that you're saying. There are so many out there that really you can't blame anything if you don't. Like I say, it's about where you put your energy. Your energy can go into, I'm just feeling black and I'm just going to moan and be bitter with myself. Or you can choose to throw everything you've got, be creative with this negative situation that you've got, and see how you can start trying to make it a bit more positive, or you a bit more positive. You might not be able to change and control the external, but you can take measures of control back. You are not out of control. Yeah, I mean, networking, sharing, collaborating, these are all really important things. I think it's a really, the biggest thing I think that changed things for me was having a writing community, a writing tribe. You know, even if you, I know it's hard at the moment with the pandemic, we're doing much more of this online, but when things do open up, go to writers' things, go to the launches of writers you like at your local bookshop. You know, go to industry free days if they're offered, go to them, and don't go to them nervous. Go to them knowing that every person there is there for the same reason that you are. We all love writing. We love talking about writing. We love books. We love to read about writing. We love to just everything to do with the word. We love it. We're like geeks. So it's like a kind of geek convention, things like that. You are going to meet people you instantly have something in common with. And they are going to get it. They are going to get your issues with plot, with character, with structure, with whether or not you use, you know, first person, third person narrator, with whether or not the past tense, the sorts of things that will drive your partners and the people who live with you nuts will not drive other writers nuts. They love it because it also inspires them. I found that the inspiration tends to be something that happens like a spark between writers. You'll be talking to someone about what they've written, trying to cheer them up because they feel like crap, you know. And as you're doing that, you're fueling yourself. You're constantly feeding the fire. And that's what it is. Inspiration is a fire. Creativity is a fire. So feed the fire. You are making yourself more resilient in the process, because the more normalizing you do of this, the more it becomes normal. And it is normal. Rejection is normal. Having to build your own resilience is normal. These are part of the writing life. So get that same world solidarity with other writers. I'm just going to have a quick look at some of the questions. So I didn't realize I'd said fuck off. I do apologize for swearing. Can you send a rejection letter to the agent? Do you know what? They'd love it. They'd laugh. This is great, actually, to see that there are loads and loads of people who are, you know, feeling the same, who are going through the same. Elizabeth Gilbert is great, actually. I would say Big Magic, her podcast for Big Magic are well worth listening to. Some people putting some really, really good links. And yes, going back to the Hilary Mantel, read other writers' experiences of writing. They are really, really, really good, because they help you to see that, you know, that even the biggest success doesn't necessarily change things. It doesn't change that they feel that they've got imposter syndrome. It doesn't change that they're absolutely neurotic, that they can't do the same thing again. I think it's Ian Rankin who famously always has a problem with page 76. That's about as far as he goes. You know, really, really kind of stalk other writers if you haven't already. I've got a few things here as well. Excuse this rustling sound. It's me trying to find what I need from my notes. Some online suggestions that I'm going to say. I've mentioned Twitter, the hashtags, hashtag writing community, hashtag writers, and chat to them. Don't be afraid to chat to them. The more you put in, the more you're going to get back. Go to launches that are free. Go to launches of big writers, go to launches of little writers, support wherever you can anthologies. Follow book bloggers, follow people like Isabel Costello, follow, you know, Reading Selfishly is another good one. Follow them. And don't be afraid of setting up a group of your own if you can't find what you want. There are things like Jericho Writers. I assess manuscripts for Jericho Writers. They are, you know, if you have the money, they are great places to go. If you don't, there will be bursary schemes. They are always worth looking out for. Look at Mislexia for information and articles. Follow people like Damien Barr, you know, for online salons. Do workshops, agent days, go anywhere that other writers go. Look at creative writing courses. I've done several, and you know, sometimes they've been great for my writing, sometimes they've just been lovely because I've met people and connected afterwards, and we've kept going. Regional writer centres are excellent for that. They really, really are. Yeah, someone's just put, David Armand replied to a tweet of mine. Same thing happened to me with David Nichols, I have to say. I nearly died, you know, and a poet I really liked who has thousands. It's amazing when somebody really massive applies to your thing. And someone else is saying here, almost worse than rejection is the big silence when you send something out. That doesn't stop. Let me tell you, what, like I'm saying about preparing yourself for it being hard, you will have the same thing when your book goes to editors. Sometimes you hear back really quickly. Sometimes you are waiting months and months and months with nothing. And it's hell. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say, oh yeah, that's easy to deal with, because it's not. It's horrible. Any kind of silence is horrible. Silence is the worst of all, because you're in limbo. You don't know what's happening. You have no idea. No is a fairly quick process quite often, someone said to me. That doesn't apply necessarily in the publishing, the book, the writing world. No and silence is, who knows? You know, you just have to find your ways. Like I'm saying to you, build your resilience. Find the things that work for you. Find the writers that work for you, the inspiration that works for you. You know, yeah, go to festivals, go to author talks, check your local bookshops, you know, chat to your local bookshops. Make those connections that you can still feel a part of a world which you need to feel part of, because you are part of it. So someone else has just said that Eventbrite, they're fantastic. I mean, things like this, the Stay at Home Literary Festival, fantastic. London's Writers Salon, yeah, you know, there are so many good things out there. Someone else has just said, start writing something completely different while you're waiting. Best advice ever. You may feel that you can't, but writing is the best distraction there is. The only answer for the pain is the pain. You can't avoid the pain of rejection. You can't. Yeah, I mean, someone's just saying, I got a close call. You know, I stopped writing for a year. So did I. It was absolutely horrible. And she's absolutely right. Or whether you're, sorry, Melly, I don't know if you're a girl, but back writing now after a year doing it for me, that's the only way that you can write. If you write thinking of a marketplace or trying to please someone else, another thing that my agent says, she likes to work with her authors when they've got something finished. She is not wildly keen about doing that while they're writing something, because she doesn't want them to be informed by her, what she thinks. And yeah, that's one thing I did with that agent that I had. I tried so hard to impress her. I kind of didn't write what was really what that book should have been. I know now exactly what I would do to it, and I will rewrite it at some point. But I spent so much time trying to make it what I thought she wanted. You can't write for someone else. You have to write for you, and it has to be your, what really gets you here. What really drives that passion. It's an enormous ask to do something for nothing and to be rejected and to do it again and again and again. Sorry about the ping. It's a muscle, and sometimes it feels like you're running a marathon and you've burnt your own muscle out, you know. It just keep going is the only thing I can say to you. Feel the anger, feel the pain. Maybe you need to take a complete break. Maybe you need to watch Netflix for a year. Nothing is wasted. Whatever you're watching, films, TV episodes, Game of Thrones, doesn't matter. Whatever you're watching, like whatever you're reading, is filling you. It's constantly going inside, feeding little creative parts of you that you can't see yet. And I think that's a really important point to remember. You can't see the future. You can't see what you're going to produce next. You can only sit down and write, because writing is what you do. You're not trying to be an author at the point that you're sitting and putting your fingers on a keyboard. You're being a writer. So keep that distinction in your head. They're not one and the same thing. You know, can you work a better book? Can you focus better on prose, on plot, on structure? Can you learn more about those things? Writing is not a hiding place. I think this is Jeanette Winterson. She said, writing's not a hiding place. It's a finding place. You find yourself on the page, and you will find your pain of rejection on a page somewhere else. Maybe it will come back to you in a story about lost love. I need the Q&A just for a second. Have I ever resubmitted something I'd improved to the same agent publisher who rejected it previously? Yes, I have. Like I say, that Jeanette Winterson writing is a finding place. Yes, I have. I've submitted a revised novel to a couple of the agents who were interested in it before, and it was a no. And I've submitted, or my agent submitted something once, and a no tends to be a no unless they've asked you to specifically to revise and resubmit. And one thing I will say to you here that I've learned, one piece of advice, if they're doing this and they're not signing you, I would be saying to them what kind of time frame, because I assumed it meant I would be being signed, and it didn't. And that was 2 odd years of my life. So find out what their intention is, and don't do too much work before they commit to you. They are working for you at the end of the day, and it's really hard to remember that. So yeah, I would, if they've asked you to, if it's radically different and they showed interest but didn't say resubmit it, then yeah. But chances are, if they've rejected it once, they may reject it again. Yeah, I maybe would be less. There are a lot of agents, so I submitted to Jo my first novel, she rejected it. This one she took. So yes, that's worth doing. But they were 2 completely different books. If it was the same one, no, I wouldn't have done, because a no is a no, and they have quite good memories. They tend to remember things that they've read. So no, I wouldn't, unless it's a different book. What advice would I have for an agented author who's currently on submission and everything's very slow with only passes so far? Oh God, yeah. I wish I had advice that I could give you other than it is gruesome. Being on submission, this is the thing. You think you're going to get an agent and you think that rejection stuff is going to stop. It doesn't. It just moves up to another level. And this is exactly that level. I've been there to a point. I still am there with 1 or 2. It's very, very, very hard. And it's very hard now. My agent was telling me this a week or so ago. It's extremely hard now. Everything is slower. Everybody's burnt out. It's a hard time for debuts because obviously there's been no kind of bookshop, footfall, skin contact. So it's been harder for people to publicize and to do word of mouth the way that they ordinarily would. I would say just try and get on with something else. It's the only advice I can give you. There really isn't any way of making the waiting easier other than to distract. So get on with something else. Sometimes I don't go straight back to writing. I will go into work. I'll throw myself into work, or I'll just take a couple of weeks off and go and do the garden or go and visit people or something. Or, my work's portable, so I can take that anywhere. But in terms of waiting, yeah, I really think that there's nothing you can do but get on with the next thing. In terms of rejection, get on with the next thing. So yeah, I mean, I don't know whether we're at time now. I keep sort of getting little messages. But yeah, really try and find your tribe would be my biggest piece of advice. And remember the Christmas tree, because that will save you more times than you know. And remember, nothing is wasted. Remember, it's an apprenticeship. Nobody comes into a writing life brilliantly prepared for a writing life, because a writing life is not necessarily an easy one. It doesn't follow the normal rules of hard work. So I think it's really important to, don't see it as a zero-sum game. See it as a marathon, not a sprint, to use another cliche. And, people have been doing this for a lot of years, and there is a reason why they all say the same thing. So listen to them. Listen to what these experienced writers say. Your most favorite writers, read their experiences. And don't stop. Don't stop. You're only literally gonna fail if you are not writing and not putting things out there. Then you're guaranteed to fail. That's an absolute 100% cert. But all the time you're trying and all the time you're writing, at some point, it's going to come good for you. And I really wish you all the best of luck. I do. I have no idea how long. I think I might have another few minutes. So yeah, what other links do I have? A couple of books, actually, if you haven't read them. Read Bird by Anne Lamott. She's American. It's an absolutely superb, funny book. It's brilliant about writing. It's excellent. Read Stephen King's On Writing. Yeah, he used to nail his rejections on a spike on the fridge or something. Yeah, someone's just said The Artist's Way. Read that. I'm going to say one more that's quite weird. It's called Nobody Wants to Read Your Shit by a guy called Stephen Pressfield. It's very short. He's a Hollywood screenwriter now, but he worked in advertising in LA. It's very short. Some of the chapters are 3 lines long, but it tells you how to make people want to read your shit. And you need really to take on board the lessons he says. And they, you know, that applies from writing a thesis to writing a novel. His belief is you can make anything. You can make people care. So there's so much to do. If you're rejected, learn more, find out more, use your energy wisely, work out what you need and go for it. And don't let money stand in your way. Don't let time stand in your way. There is never going to be a perfect time, never going to be a perfect office, never going to be a perfect this. Write because you love writing, and let other writers help you. They're the people that you need. They're the people who will help you through this. So I think we kind of pretty much are at time.
Yeah, that's really great, Jenny. Thank you so much for that. That was really helpful.
I hope so.
Lapping it up, it was really, really helpful. Thanks so much for that. And I'm sure everybody will write in the chat. They're just writing thanks.
Oh, that's so lovely. Thank you to all the people thanking me. I sound American.
Yeah. Oh, lovely.
Thank you for hearing me.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, we're going to end there if that's okay. And yeah, just have a lovely rest of the day.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone who came. Thank you. Thanks a lot.